What do animals think happens when you die? Have you ever watched an animal standing over something dead and wondered what it was thinking? Not what it was feeling, what it was thinking. Because there is a difference. Feeling is instinct. Thinking is awareness. And the question of whether animals understand death, really understand it, is one of the strangest questions in science. Because if an animal understands death, that means it understands that life ends. And if it understands that life ends, it might understand that its own life ends. And that is not just biology, that is philosophy. So the real question is not, do animals grieve? The better question is, do animals know what they are grieving? Let's start with elephants. Elephants are one of the few species that consistently return to the bodies of their dead. They touch the bones with their trunks, they stand in silence. They sometimes carry the bones short distances before setting them down. Researchers have documented herds returning to the same location year after year, long after the body is gone, as if marking the place where something important happened. This is not panic. This is not confusion. This looks like recognition. But recognition of what exactly? In 2016, a study published in the Royal Society Open Science observed wild African elephants interacting with elephant carcasses and the remains of other species. The elephants showed significantly more interest in elephant remains than in the remains of rhinos or buffalo. Even when all bones were unfamiliar, they were not just responding to death, they were responding to their dead. That distinction matters. Now think about chimpanzees. There are documented cases of chimpanzee mothers carrying the bodies of their deceased infants for days, sometimes weeks. They groom them, they protect them, they behave in many ways as if the infant is still alive. One of the most studied cases involved a chimpanzee named Noel at Bossou, Guinea, who carried her dead infant for 68 days. Researchers debated whether this was grief, denial, or something else entirely. But here's the uncomfortable part. Nobody fully agreed on the answer. Because to answer it, you have to decide whether a chimpanzee can understand the permanence of death, and that is harder to prove than it sounds. Permanence is the key word. Human children typically develop a full understanding of death between ages 5 and 7. Before that, many children believe death is temporary or reversible. A chimpanzee may exist in a permanent version of that earlier stage. It may feel the absence, it may feel the loss, but whether it understands that absence is forever is something science cannot yet confirm. Crows are different. Crows do not mourn the way mammals do, but they respond to death in a way that suggests something closer to processing than grief. When a crow dies, nearby crows will often gather around the body. They call loudly. They sometimes mob the area. Researchers at the University of Washington found that crows avoid locations where they have witnessed another crow die, even when no danger is present anymore. This suggests crows are extracting information from death. They are learning something. The body becomes a signal. The location becomes a warning. To a crow, death may not be a mystery. It may be data. That is a very different relationship with death than the one elephants or chimpanzees appear to have. And it raises an interesting question. Is the crow's response more rational, or is it just colder? Dogs occupy a strange middle space. Dogs that lose a companion animal or human they were bonded to often show behavioral changes. Reduced appetite, increased searching behavior, disrupted sleep. These are recognized grief-like responses, but whether a dog understands that the absence is permanent is unclear. A dog may keep going to the door its owner used to walk through, not because it knows its owner is dead, but because its owner has not come back yet. To the dog, the world has simply become confusing. The expected pattern has broken down. Whether that confusion ever resolves into understanding is something we cannot know from the outside. Dolphins have been observed supporting dying pod members, sometimes for hours. They push sick or injured dolphins toward the surface to help them breathe. They stay close even when the animal stops moving. In some cases, they appear reluctant to leave the body. Marine biologists are careful not to overinterpret this behavior, but it is equally difficult to dismiss. What is clear is that dolphins are aware something has changed. The social fabric of the pod has shifted. Whether they understand why is a different question entirely. Here is where things get genuinely strange. Some researchers have proposed that the ability to understand death may be connected to the ability to imagine the future. To understand that life ends, you first have to understand that life continues. You have to have a mental model of time that extends forward. You have to be able to picture a future where something that exists now does not exist later. That is a very specific cognitive ability. Humans have it. Great apes appear to have partial versions of it. Some birds show signs of future planning. But for most animals, existence may be experienced more in the present tense. Not life and death, just now. And then now again. Which means most animals may not fear death the way humans do. Not because they are brave, but because the concept may not be available to them in the same way. They respond to danger. They respond to absence. They respond to loss. But the abstract understanding that everything alive must eventually stop, that may require a kind of mind that evolution has only produced a handful of times. And that brings us back to the elephant standing over the bones in the dry grass. Is it mourning? Is it curious? Is it confused? Is it remembering? We do not know. We may never fully know, because the only way to truly understand what an animal thinks about death would be to think like that animal. And we cannot do that. We can only watch. watch. But here is what watching has taught us. Animals respond to death in ways that are too consistent and too specific to be random. Elephants return to their dead. Chimpanzees refuse to let go. Crows learn from it. Dogs wait. Dolphins stay close. None of them may have a word for death. None of them may lie awake at night wondering what comes after. But they all seem to register that something has ended. That something that was here is no longer here. And that the world is different because of it. Maybe that is enough to count as understanding. Or maybe it just proves that loss does not require language. It does not require philosophy. It does not require knowing what death is. It only requires knowing that something is gone. There is one more layer to this worth sitting with. Humans have built entire civilizations around death. Rituals, religions, burial practices, art, music, literature. Almost everything humans create exists partly in response to the knowledge that we will die. Death is not just a biological event for humans. It is a cultural force. And yet some of the behaviors we consider most deeply human around death, returning to where the dead were, staying close to a dying companion, changing behavior after a loss, these behaviors exist in animals that have no culture in the human sense. No funerals, no prayers, no monuments, just presence, just stillness, just the refusal to move on immediately. Maybe rituals did not create our relationship with death. Maybe the relationship with death came first. Maybe it existed in our ancestors long before the first grave was dug. And maybe the elephants and the crows and the chimpanzees and the dolphins are not primitive versions of human grief. Maybe they are earlier versions of the same instinct, the instinct to stop, to acknowledge, to register that something real has ended. We spent a long time asking whether animals understand death, but perhaps the more honest question is whether understanding was ever the point. Because understanding did not make human grief easier, it made it more complicated. Animals may experience loss without the weight of knowing what loss means across a lifetime. They may feel the absence without the dread of their own, and maybe, just maybe, that is not a limitation. Maybe that is a different kind of wisdom.